A couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, most of you were handed a pre-event survey. At some point in the very near future, it looks like in about 3 seconds if he catches my eye, there's going to be an envelope that gets passed around, so please just drop those in the envelope as those come back. That would be a big help. That's the post. There's a pre and a post. That's the pre. The one you got is the pre. No, just the pre-event survey, the half page. The comment card, which is also in your package. It's a comment question card. So if during the course of the evening you have a comment that you want to make about the event, then please just fill it out, and then on your way out, drop it in one of the collection boxes or give it to one of the volunteers at any time. There's no great urgency for that. Either one. Any comment you'd like to pass along to the coalition or the college or anything. So, number two, it says at the top, comment or question. If you check the question box, yes, toward the end of the debate. We will be collecting questions from the audience as well as some of our online viewers and Twitter spiel. We'll go through that. Just understand one thing, that we really are limited on time, so we may answer only 2 or 3 questions from the audience, okay? But I am definitely interested in hearing what your questions may be. At some point, we'll probably put them back on the website that you registered and try to get the best answer you can. So please submit the questions. Finally, we recognize that many people have a strong view when it comes to this issue. And while passion is a great thing, disrespect is not. So we are asking everybody in the crowd to please be respectful of your neighbor. Okay? Excitement is great, but you know where the line is. Please don't cross it. All right? Okay, so as you may not know, the Palm Beach County Substance Awareness Coalition is tasked with working with our community partners to implement drug and alcohol prevention strategies. That's what we do. Part of that strategic plan is making sure that community members are informed and educated about certain issues that fit into our mission. Okay? So while I'm sure you can guess what side of the issue the coalition might be on, what I really want to present is the information in an unbiased way. That's why we have both ends of the spectrum here with us tonight. So what we're really hoping for tonight is that you leave here more informed with a better understanding of the issue. And that's the goal. So hopefully we'll achieve that tonight. Real quick, the debate's going to follow a standard debate type of format. Each of our debaters is going to get 4 minutes of just open commentary, kind of their introduction. Then they're each going to get 3 minutes as a rebuttal. And then we're going to roll into the questions. There'll be alternating sequence as far as who answers. And then each debater is going to be given 3 minutes to answer. As far as points that come up, opportunity to say something about what the other said, that's going to be at the moderator's discretion. Okay? Then, as I mentioned, we'll be collecting some questions, and then we'll answer with those as well. And then at the very end, the debaters are going to be given a few minutes for final statements. 5 minutes final statements. All right. So, with that in mind, let me introduce to you first our moderator and then our debaters for this evening. I think it's in the wings. I certainly hope so. Please help me welcome our moderator, Mr. Schultz. He has been at the Palm Beach Post since 1976. He's been in his current position, the editorial page editor, since 1990. He's worked as a reporter, columnist, city editor, and managing editor, and is the winner of the 1993 Best of Cox Newspapers Award for editorial writing, as well as moderating numerous debates. So please help me welcome Mr. Randy Schultz. Okay. Next, debating in favor of marijuana for medical purpose, we have Mr. Aaron Houston.
Yeah!
Mr. Houston is the former executive director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, where he oversaw the work of a national staff that coordinated students on more than 200 campuses around the world. He is nationally recognized as an expert on drug policy and marijuana law, having played a key role in pushing the Department of Justice to formally issue written guidelines on medical marijuana in October of 2009. Please welcome Mr. Aaron Duncan. And then finally, debating in opposition of marijuana for medical purpose is Mr. Kevin Sabet. Kevin is a former advisor. Kevin is a former advisor to 3 U.S. presidential administrations and an assistant professor of psychiatry and director of the Drug Policy Institute at the University of Florida. He served as a political appointee at the Office of National Drug Control for both Presidents Bush and Obama, and just recently started Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Please welcome Mr. Kevin Sabet. So we're going to start. I think Mr. Schultz has a quick statement, and then we're going to start out with the opening comments.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Please remember that however much you cheer, it doesn't validate or invalidate one of the debater's points. Thank you very much. It's like when we get letters to the editor and they have 10 exclamation points at the end of every sentence. It doesn't make you any more eloquent. We are going to try to turn questions tonight the way restaurants turn tables. We would like to turn as many as possible to get to as many aspects of this complex and fascinating issue as we can. To that end, we are inviting questions from the audience. After the first couple of questions to the debaters, you will find cards going around that you can fill out, and we will take some of those in the course of events. Please do not add 10 exclamation points to your question. It will not increase your chance of getting the question picked and asked. These 2 gentlemen fortunately know each other. They're almost like a road show, so that's good. We will try to perhaps ask them a couple of things they have not been asked, if that's possible. And I will try to stick pretty quickly to the time, but if either of you has something that you think is relative to the question that was asked and is a bit bumped over the time limit, we'll try to get that in. We want to have a certain amount of flexibility to have as good a time as possible. We will begin with statements from each of them, focusing on the broader issue of marijuana legalization in general, and we will stick to that topic and then work our way as we go through as much as we can to the amendment that is being subject to the petition drive in Florida. So we didn't toss a coin, but since I'll just take moderator's choice and say that since the cooler welcome was for Mr. Sabet, we'll let him go first since obviously he's the visiting team tonight.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You will have 4 minutes.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you. I'm used to that. I went to Cal and I started a group called Citizens for a Drug-Free Berkeley. It was about as popular as the Coalition for a Wine-Free France, but we're trying to do some good work. But I want to thank the moderator for being here, Mr. Schultz, and Aaron, of course, for agreeing to debate. It's a sort of pleasure to debate somebody that really I consider a friend, even though we disagree. I think we both can agree that we should not be disagreeable as we disagree, and I think that's the foundation of any democracy, and everyone, I hope shares their view, and I'm sure they will. And I think that's positive. And so I appreciate the venue here and the Substance Abuse Coalition for inviting me, Jeff, and the staff, the hard workers here making this possible. I'll get right into it. I mean, I think that, and I know it's called the Great Debate, but I'm hoping it's be more of a civil discussion where we can discuss some of the bigger ideas. I think the issue of, I would actually say drug policy in general, but we're talking about marijuana policy specifically, has unfortunately been falsely dichotomized in this country. And what do I mean by that? I mean that essentially you're in one of 2 camps, kind of like how we are in tonight. You're either in the camp that wants to be part of a so-called war on drugs, that wants to incarcerate folks and focus on hardline enforcement policies, or you're in a camp that wants to legalize drugs, that it's sort of You want it full reign out there. All drugs are fine. In the case of marijuana, marijuana should be sold and just like alcohol is and legal with some certain limitations. And that those are really the only two camps to be in. And the reason I actually started Project SAM, which we talked about earlier, smart approaches to marijuana with someone like Patrick Kennedy, who's certainly not from a conservative side where you would think an anti-drug activist would be, is that both of us and others really reject that dichotomy. I think that's an overly simplistic way to look at what is a complex problem. What we do know about all drugs of abuse, including marijuana, is that most people, and I think Aaron and I would agree, that use marijuana, or really any substance actually, don't have a problem with it. The vast majority do not get addicted. The vast majority of marijuana smokers do not go on to use other drugs. But the fact that a small minority has a problem with it, and this is with any drug of abuse, including alcohol, that small minority constitutes the majority of the damage of the problem. So we know, for example, that the 20% of people who drink irresponsibly consume 90% of the volume of alcohol in this country. And so when you talk to the liquor lobby and the alcohol industry and also the tobacco industry, who they're really concerned with, who they care about the 20% of irresponsible users, not in a way that they care about them, that they want them to stop drinking. No, on the contrary, they want them to keep drinking and they want to increase their use. In fact, these companies make money off of addiction. And so the issue of legalization versus prohibition, I think, is a false one, because on the one hand, I don't think folks should be incarcerated for small-time use. I actually do think there are medical properties of marijuana, just like there are medical properties of opium. But we don't smoke opium to get those effects, and frankly, we do not need to smoke marijuana to get any medical effects that they have. So I'm actually not against the medical use of marijuana if done in the right way. And I'm also not in favor of throwing people in prison. What I'm also not in favor of is creating the new version of the tobacco industry, which is exactly what we're going to have if we legalize marijuana outright. I know that's not what Florida's focused on, but that is the broader view. And so if we think we were hoodwinked by big tobacco for 80 years of lies and deceit, just wait until they get their hands and the new marijuana industry gets its hands on you in a capitalist structure and addicts other people for profit. And that's exactly what these industries will do.
Okay, we will give you 10 seconds extra of applause time. Mr. Houston.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Kevin. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to be here. I would say very simply that marijuana prohibition has failed. It has been a decades-long failed experiment. And how has it failed? We've ruined countless young people's lives because we've labeled them criminals. We've locked human beings in cages for taking a botanical medicine that has been in use in human history for thousands of years. It has ancient medical properties. In fact, some of the most ancient people on the planet, the Uyghurs, were discovered to have a 1,000-year-old supply because they believed in the medical properties of it. But skipping to present day, to 2013, our government has engaged in not only a propaganda campaign against marijuana that has poisoned the minds of the population around the relative dangers of it, so that our kids now believe that taking marijuana is somehow as harmful as taking heroin in one dose, which is insane, and that is exactly what the government has told our young people. So not only have we confused the issue entirely, but we have also locked people in cages. We have locked human beings in cages, many times for the simple crime of taking their medicine. And what we see now is 20 states plus the District of Columbia have decided that medical marijuana works, that for people with debilitating illnesses, it is a medicine that should be available with their doctor's recommendation. But in this opening statement, I want to point out as well that the failure of marijuana prohibition overall has led to the Mexican drug cartel and South American drug cartel organizations getting 60% of their profits from marijuana sales alone, according to one study conducted by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Not only has it done that, it's led to the cartels having control of drug markets in thousands of American cities. Back 10 years ago, the cartels were only present in several dozen American cities, then in 230, and then all of a sudden we're seeing them in thousands of American cities because the profit potential for growing marijuana is so huge. It's like making tomatoes illegal. It doesn't work because it's a plant that grows in the ground. You know, I've been a marijuana lobbyist now for about 10 years, and I've discovered that being a marijuana lobbyist is kind of like being a priest, because people will tell you their secrets and confess things to you that they might not confess to Kevin if they were talking to him, or to the police union lobbyists, right? And what it has led me to believe is that there is a silenced majority in this country that firmly believes we need to end the prohibition of marijuana. And now we're seeing Americans starting to speak up about that to the tune of over 50% in the most recent Gallup poll, and over 50% in the most recent Pew poll that studied these figures. So now we're seeing Americans starting to speak up. We've seen in Colorado, with its medical marijuana system that's well regulated, that the sky has not fallen. We've seen that Colorado and Washington passed measures that legalize the possession of marijuana for adults, legalize other aspects of the distribution system. And again, the sky has not fallen. So my argument would be that we have tried the status quo and it has not worked. And I recognize, Kevin, that you're saying that we both agree that the status quo doesn't work. I think I would go farther in saying that we need something that's a radical departure from the status quo, and we need to legalize marijuana.
All right. More applause, the less time for questions. I did not tell everybody to silence your cell phones. If you did not, please do so. Mr. Sabet, are there some points you'd like to pick off for rebuttal?
I think there are a few. I think first, we should be realistic and look at the facts in terms of the role of marijuana, for example, in the criminal justice system. We know that less than 0.1% are in state prisons for people whose only crime is smoking marijuana. Now, there are folks in prisons that have marijuana and other crimes, and I actually believe that, again, if you have a small amount of marijuana, you should not be stigmatized with a criminal record. You should not be put in prison. So I'm not arguing that that should be different. But let's be serious about what law enforcement do today. They're not focusing on low-level marijuana users. Now, there are, yes, hundreds of thousands of arrests. Most of those arrests result in really the equivalent of a parking ticket. In some places, they result in a criminal record, and I think that should be changed. So yeah, in Florida, if that's the case, then that should be changed. But we should be not obscuring the facts nationwide. We should also not obscure the facts about the underground market. The underground market, according to really the best study we have, not the one done 8 years ago, but the one done by RAND, not by the government, is that it's between 15 and 20% of overall revenues come from marijuana. Now, that's still substantial, and I'm not discounting that. But if we wanted to get rid of the cartels, we would not only have to legalize marijuana, we then would also have to legalize their main sources of revenue, which are, first and foremost, human trafficking, including sex trafficking, cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine production, in addition to the other crimes like internet crimes and piracy. So, the idea that these cartels are simply, A, going to not be involved in the marijuana market if we legalize, which there's going to be a huge incentive for them to stay in the marijuana market, selling marijuana to people the government won't sell to, young people, selling it in quantities and in THC concentrates that will not be legal, for example, over 20, 30%, etc. But even if they were to get out of the black market, which I don't think they will, the idea that they're going to be even significantly diminished, I can't buy, because they're not making the majority of their money from marijuana. So again, should there be reforms to current policy? Yeah, and I talked about that earlier. But again, what we're about to do with creating lobbying groups, with creating industry associations, right now there's a multi-million-dollar private equity holding firm ready to make money off of legal marijuana by selling products related to that industry. This is what scares me. I could care less if you're the otherwise responsible citizen smoking marijuana in the privacy of your own home on a Friday night. That's you, great, but have fun with that. I could really care less. The issue is legalization isn't about you, because frankly, you're doing that within the status quo, and you're here tonight, you're okay. The issue with legalization is about creating the new big tobacco, because that's the new implication for legalization, not the otherwise responsible, good-looking young man smoking pot on the weekend. It is the creating the massive, what I would call Marlboralization of marijuana. We know the tobacco industry wants to get involved. We have documents that have had to be forcibly released by them that talk about their involvement. That's what's scary to me.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Houston.
Thank you.
Your points.
Yeah, so first of all, I don't think it's correct, Kevin, to say that if we wanted to get rid of the cartels, we would have to legalize human trafficking. First of all, the reason marijuana is so profitable is because it's a minimally processed agricultural commodity, and it is the only minimally processed agricultural commodity in the world that has been made illegal. Marijuana will never scream from the trunk of a car for its life like a human will. It's much more complicated for cartels to engage in human trafficking. It is less complicated for them. It's much simpler to buy up a foreclosed property and to make a grow house out of it. That is so comparing human trafficking to marijuana trafficking is just simply not fair. And it's also not fair to compare it to other drugs outside of marijuana, because those other drugs, heroin, cocaine, even cocaine, is derived naturally. The production process is significant. It is a significantly processed commodity. So part of what makes marijuana, precisely because marijuana is so minimally processed and so easy to grow, it is so profitable for people who have ill intent. I also want to say that it's not fair to compare marijuana legalization with the tobacco industry for several reasons. Number one, tobacco is regulated very, very differently in this country than alcohol is. And what I am seeking to do, and my colleagues, advocate colleagues in Washington, D.C. and around the country who are working to regulate marijuana like alcohol, is to do exactly that, to regulate it like alcohol, not tobacco. And the key difference here is that with tobacco regulation, now because the FDA controls tobacco, and previously there were federal laws that allowed every state to have tobacco legal, tobacco is very differently regulated than alcohol. Most people probably aren't aware in modern day that Mississippi, up until 1966, banned alcohol entirely, as far as I know. Up until 1987, point of consumption sales in Kansas were illegal. You couldn't go to a bar in Kansas until 1987. And the point I make about this is that what we would like to do, regulating marijuana like alcohol, is exactly what we have seen with the alcohol legalization model over the years, which is this, that if you're Oklahoma and you're next door to Colorado and you would like to keep marijuana illegal,